So welcome to all of you. Happy to be with you and be reflecting on these themes this morning. I just have a few slides. I'm not planning to present a lot in that form, but here you see the yeah growth of interest in meditation in the scientific literature. So over the last 30 years. You see from searching for the keyword meditation, 13 in 1991 to almost 2000 last year, and and uh, we go back to William James, saying the faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. An education which should improve this faculty would be the education par excellence. But it is easier to define this ideal than to give practical directions for bringing it about. In a way, one set of practical directions for bringing it about is what we do. This attentional training that we do. But this is also, this Asian monastic path is also a mystical path. It is not attentional training for its own purposes exactly. And so again, we have James echoing with a certain kind of reverence for this mystical dimension. Our normal waking consciousness, rational consciousness as we call it, is but one special type of consciousness. Whilst all about it, parted from it, by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different. We may go through life without suspecting their existence, but no account of the universe in its totality can be final, which leaves these other forms of consciousness disregarded. How to regard them is the question, for they are so discontinuous with ordinary consciousness. They may determine attitudes, though they cannot furnish formulas, and open a region, though they fail to give a map. They forbid a premature closing of our accounts with reality. The increase in the kind of scientific interest around meditation is evident, reflected in the increase in practice, use of meditation. And so this is, there's not good data from more recently that I could find easily, but one of the kind of repeated national surveys here we see from 2012 to 2017, you see the growth in that center columns of meditation. And this is just, have you practiced meditation at some point in the past 12 months? That's been the question. And you see it's grouped here with yoga and chiropractic, which is kind of interesting and sort of a testament to the state of how these things are grouped together is meaningful in itself. Here's data for kids. You see the growth over this period of 5 years, and I imagine there's been a lot of growth since 2017. Certain, just anecdotally, when I teach retreats, if there's 100 people in the retreat, there will be many, I don't know what, it's a lot of people who are now coming into retreat, residential retreat through the route of apps and digital technology. And so the let me pause this for a moment. The kind of motivations that people are coming in with to practice meditation, about 10% were recommended by a physician. Yeah, maybe 20% consulted a teacher or a class. Most people are practicing on their own, actually, it seems. And the people who did consult with a class or a teacher or something, the median annual spending on meditation was $120. And the practice motivations were general wellness or disease prevention in about 3/4 of people, improving energy in 60%, improving memory concentration in about half of the respondents. And I don't know where enlightenment was there, but it's lower down, right? And so this is the convergence or collision of different traditions. And so there's a question like, how should we think about the application of a kind of Asian renunciate tradition to the realm of mental health, of healing? What exactly is the Dharma for? And who gets to decide what it's for? Or what is, to use medical language, what is the scope of practice of the Dharma? What is the scope of practice of a nurse or a nurse practitioner or a physician or something like this? What is the scope of practice of the Dharma? And how is the Dharma transformed by its interaction with the realm of mental health, with the realm of all the different encounters it's having in this culture? In the New York Times about 15 years ago, they wrote, the question's not whether mindfulness meditation will become a sophisticated therapeutic technique or lapse into self-help cliche. The answer to that question is yes to both. So we can think about well-being as a continuum. And so on one end, we have the most intense, unmitigated suffering. And then on the other end, we have like just profound flourishing. Maybe we call it self-actualization or awakening or something like this. And then at the midpoint, we have something what we call normal, Of course, Maslow said what we call normal in psychology is really a psychopathology of the average, so undramatic and so widely spread that we don't even notice it ordinarily. It's very harsh language, actually, but what we call normal is the psychopathology of the average, meaning what we consider kind of like, what an okay human life is actually full of dukkha. Yeah. And traditionally, the path of Dharma has been largely devoted to the span of well-being from okay enough to profound flourishing. It's been about potentiating well-being. It's been about kind of refining out more and more subtle layers of suffering. but importantly, the Dharma has relevance for this half of the spectrum of well-being too. And this is where the public health interest really is. This is where there's much more bang for the buck, actually. Um, you know, fiddling with the subtle kilesas, attachment to light and bliss. This is not the priority of public health institutions. Yeah. It's like, no, there's like so much suffering. And how can this path of practice be of use in those ways? So, um, there are academic, and there were so many different ways I might have gone during this time together, and how I sort of structured the different themes, and am, yeah, no doubt leaving lots of questions unanswered, and but hopefully we have some productive discussions together. So there are, one of the questions is how we sort of situate this Buddhist tradition with science, with empiricism, and in the academic world, there's sometimes, there are buildings that separate different departments. This is the biology, and this is the literature department, and this is education, this is medicine, right? And then there are these kind of siloed academic departments based on particular expertise. But then there are also increasingly common interdisciplinary approaches where you're bringing to bear a range of different forms of expertise. And here, the problem rather than the discipline becomes the focal point. And a very diverse expertise is relevant. And what I often say is that dukkha is an interdisciplinary problem. Yeah. It is not the province of just like one discourse, yeah, be it Dharma or science or anything. And the fact that the Dharma is the only medicine, I would say, for certain species of suffering doesn't mean it's the medicine for all species of suffering. Yeah. And how we kind of this dialogue that's happening between disciplines is important, and we want to have it in intelligent ways. So what is the stance? And I have, I have like very deep devotion, in to science and the spirit of empiricism, and obviously to the Dharma, which I have dedicated my energy to, my life to. And so anyway, as I talk, I'm sort of like, on one shoulder, I have my Dharma teachers, and on the other shoulder, I have my scientific mentors, and I'm trying not to mortify either of them. And we will see how I do. Yeah. We'll see. Yeah. So what is the stance of the Dharma towards other discourses, towards science, medicine, philosophy, history, these things? What is the stance of a religious tradition to these other traditions? So one possible stance is just to ignore these other disciplines. And this would go something like, well, the Dharma is dukkha might be an interdisciplinary problem, but the Dharma is really sufficient for all that truly matters. Yeah. Another stance might be competition. This is a very familiar stance of religious traditions towards the secular, a sense of like, that the secular, the scientific, the historical is a kind of encroachment on this sacred ground of the Dharma, needs to be fought off in some ways. You see this acted out historically and at present. Another way of situating Dharma science is something like what non-overlapping magisteria. Yeah, so there's a famous phrase from Stephen Jay Gould, who was a kind of evolutionary biologist, and was trying, and a science communicator, and was trying to find a way for religion and science to coexist somewhat peacefully. And Gould said, science tries to document the factual character of the natural world and to develop theories that coordinate and explain these facts. Religion, on the other hand, operates in the equally important but utterly different realm of human purposes, meanings, and values, subjects that the factual domain of science might illuminate but can never resolve. That was his attempt, non-overlapping magisteria, ways of situating Dharma science, religion science. Yeah. There is another way, and of something like selective appropriation. There's the cultural appropriation of kind of, on one side of science or mental health, of divorcing mindfulness from its rich cultural history. But on the other side, there's a kind of selective appropriation of for example, these sort of tropes in Dharma of highlighting supportive scientific data, things that sort of confirm our Buddhist presuppositions, and sort of trotting out data that amplify those. So much of like the way neuroscience is used rhetorically is an attempt to convince us that we should keep practicing, which is okay. That's all right. But this is a kind of selectively, cherry picking certain bits of science as a way of reinforcing Buddhist notions. And I just want to say, science doesn't just give, it also takes. Yeah. And so if we as Dharma practitioners get into the business of marshaling scientific evidence for our claims, we want to do this carefully, because science doesn't just give, it will take too. Yeah. Now, the last kind of relationship between these different traditions, which is closest to my heart, is something like a conversation. It is a truly bidirectional flow of information. It is treating dukkha as an interdisciplinary problem with a degree of reverence for the respective zones of expertise. And it is about accepting influence. In couples therapy, there's a notion of like accepting influence. Can one partner accept the influence of another? Yeah. And I think we want to be open to accepting influence. So there is, I want to say, the problem of scientism. Scientism. In this discussion, there's the problem of scientism, which is sort of the sense that that science is the ultimate arbiter of all kind of claims and all value or something. It's sort of kind of reductionistic vision of the plurality of knowledge traditions. And Karl Popper said, despite my admiration for scientific knowledge, I'm not an adherent of scientism. For scientism dogmatically asserts the authority of scientific knowledge, whereas I do not believe in any authority and have always resisted dogmatism. Yeah. The more you study the philosophy of science, the more humble you are about what science does and does not do. And so there needs to be there is, and I think in scientists who are conscious of the philosophy, the kind of epistemological understanding of science, there is a lot of humility and empiricism is the scientific method is has staggering power. And many of the claims of the Dharma are empirical claims. They are empirically testable claims. They are falsifiable claims. Yeah. The nature of unhappiness, of well-being, of flourishing. Claims about the value of training our attention in this way, claims about the value of ethics for well-being, claims about how mindfulness alleviates suffering. These are all actually empirical claims. And science is a powerful way of assessing the validity of empirical claims. And maybe even more fundamental, science, in my experience, is not always practiced in this way, but science, I think when done well, is actually a form of intellectual honesty. It's a form of intellectual honesty, a willingness to be wrong. And that is, the willingness to be wrong is like just obviously profoundly lacking in the world. So the last thing I want to say about this, and then I'll just say a few more things before we pause and open it, is that the commitment to deep love, to awareness, to a kind of reverential stance to in relation to the Dharma. I feel this is actually compatible with a scientific sensibility. And there's this sense of like, well, if we welcome in kind of some of the empiricism, what happens is somehow the sacred will be compromised. And I don't think it has to be that way. It might go that way, but I don't think it has to be that way. And I don't think the kind of openness to the discourse of science, these kinds of things, necessitates a kind of reductionistic vision of the path, of its potency, of its beauty, of its depth. Sincere integrations are possible, sincere, beautiful integrations of the mindfulness tradition of Dharma tradition are possible. As an example, Marcia Linehan developed dialectical behavior therapy that's used initially around borderline personality, but kind of generally emotion dysregulation and self-harming behaviors. And mindfulness really, it's not like one of the modules, it's sort of a backbone of that treatment approach. And Linehan, about 10 years ago, sort of revealed the origins of the treatment that she's largely responsible for developing. And so this is from the New York Times. Are you one of us? The patient wanted to know, and her therapist, Marcia M. Linehan of the University of Washington, creator of a treatment used worldwide for severely suicidal people, had a ready answer. It was the one she always used to cut the question short, whether a patient asked it hopefully, accusingly, or knowingly, having glimpsed the macrame of faded burns, cuts, and welts on Dr. Linehan's arms. You mean, have I suffered? No, Marcia, the patient replied in an encounter last spring. I mean one of us, like us. Because if you were, it would give all of us so much hope. That did it, said Dr. Linehan, 68, who told her story in public for the first time last week before an audience of friends, families, and doctors at the Institute of Living, the Hartford clinic, where she was first treated for extreme social withdrawal at age 17. So many people begged me to come forward, and I just thought, well, I have to do this. I owe it to them. I cannot die a coward. And then she disclosed her own history of mental illness and failed treatment and sense of the depth of hopelessness of that and the necessity of like, okay, we can do better. How do we treat people like me? You know. And then some years later, I saw her dedication to one of the kind of one of the workbooks, one of the DBT workbooks, and which is a skills workbook. It's developing skills of emotion regulation. And she wrote, when I'm on retreats each afternoon, I walk and wring my hands, saying to all the mental health patients of the world, you don't have to wring your hands today. I'm doing it for you. Often when I dance in the hallway of my house or with groups, I invite all the mental health patients of the world to come dance with me. This book is dedicated to all the patients of the world that think no one's thinking of them. I considered telling you that I would practice skills for you so you don't have to practice them. But then I realized that if I did, you would not learn how to be skillful yourself. So instead, I wish you skillful means, and I wish that you find these skills useful. I find that touching, yeah. And you can't write a dedication like that unless your heart has been pierced in some way by the path of practice. And I have some trust that when one has a kind of deep encounter with the path of practice, that the modifications, the distillations, the articulations of this path of practice, no matter what they look like, they will have integrity if they come out of an understanding of the depth of what's possible. So we can hear many of the themes that I've been articulating in this last piece I'll share, which is from a number of the leaders in the kind of movement around mindfulness-based programs. So this is John Kabat-Zinn, Christina Feldman, the Buddhist teacher, Judd Brewer, and they asked in 2016 paper, like, what is the warp and the weft of mindfulness-based programs? And so I think the warp in like rug is sort of like the backbone of it, and the weft is sort of the design or something. And so what is the warp and the weft of mindfulness-based programs? And I'll just read, the 5 essential qualities of mindfulness-based programs. You'll hear innovations, and you'll also hear echoes of the Dharma path, which we're familiar. So mindfulness-based programs are informed by theories and practices that draw from a confluence of contemplative traditions, science, and the disciplines of medicine, psychology, and education. 2, is underpinned by a model of human experience which addresses the causes of human distress and the pathways to relieving it. 3, develops a new relationship with experience characterized by present moment focus, decentering, and an approach orientation. 4, supports the development of greater attentional, emotional, and behavioral self-regulation, as well as positive qualities such as compassion, wisdom, equanimity. And 5, engages the participant in a sustained, intensive training in mindfulness meditation practice, in an experiential, inquiry-based learning process, and in exercises to develop insight and understanding. Now, I'm curious how that reads to you, how that lands, and you can certainly hear a lot of echoes of the Dharma path, and also more of this kind of interdisciplinary approach, and a highlighting particular aspects of the Dharma path and to the exclusion of others, for example. This was their attempt to characterize mindfulness-based programming, the warp of mindfulness-based programming. And this whole conversation is happening in the context of John Kabat-Zinn's work, which is, he said this in 2011, mindfulness-based stress reduction, the 8-week program that's quite prominent as sort of secular mindfulness, was developed as one of a possibly infinite number of skillful means for bringing the Dharma into mainstream settings. It has never been about MBSR for its own sake. It has always been about the M, and the M is a very big M. We use the word mindfulness intentionally as an umbrella term to describe our work and to link it explicitly with what I have always considered to be a universal Dharma that is coextensive, if not identical, with the teachings of the Buddha Dhamma. Yeah. So I don't know where that leaves us. What are we to think of all of this? And I don't want to fight about it either, but I do want to open for questions and just any initial responses to me laying it out in this way. If you if you want to ask a question, maybe you can raise your electronic hand, and I'll unmute you.
Yeah, that sounded, the self-description sounded incredibly idealistic, particularly about the sustained, serious practice. The few people I've known who are not Buddhists who have done some sort of mindfulness thing, it was pretty short and not, not sustained, not deep. And they came away. One friend of mine came away not really understanding what it was or what the point was. And I mean, she's very intelligent. She has a PhD in psychology, and it wasn't very, I mean, that's anecdotal. But and the other question I had was the fifth description point was that mindfulness. The mindfulness movement is approach oriented, and I didn't know what that meant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. I think one of the things you're pointing to is sort of a question of attrition, to put it in clinical language. Like, what are the attrition rates in the Dharma realm, in the mindfulness realm? It's high. It's high. I don't know exactly what it is. People generally finish the dropout rates for like an 8-week mindfulness class are quite low, probably lower than CBT or something like that, or similar to that.
I don't know what CBT is.
Cognitive behavioral therapy. So like
Oh,
a standardized treatment.
uh-huh.
The dropout is, but 8 weeks is that right in the course of a Dharma life. Is that a sufficient dose, right? Like, how many people, it's amazing to me that there are treatment effects after 8 weeks, because when I think about my mind on day 1 and day 56, it was a circus gone wrong on day 1 and the same at day 56. And so like that, there are benefits, and there are probably the benefits, in those early phases of treatment are like probably mostly cognitive reframing kind of benefits, actually reappraisal, not attentional benefits. So another question maybe we'll get into, but it's like, yeah, this is like the equivalent of giving half a milligram of Prozac rather than the 20, which is standard, and so how do we understand attrition in the different spheres? Are there ways of minimizing that? What does it mean about the people who stay? And it may be the people we see. There may be that this group right here, we're the kind of super responders, that are like highly unrepresentative of the initial sample. We're the weirdos, actually, and we somehow stayed for whatever reason, and understanding, the what we would call like the moderators of treatment responsiveness, the variables that predict a kind of stronger response to the meditation treatment, to the Dharma treatment. That's important. And then the second thing was the approach orientation. This is I will talk about more about that later in the morning. That is alluding to the fact that much of our distress, especially anxiety, but other things too, is sustained by rigid, habituated forms of avoidance. And mindfulness is an approach orientation. In its basis, like all the instructions that you hear in guided meditations are ones of approach. Yeah. And so this is I think, one way of thinking about the Dharma, I will say more of this, is it is an exposure therapy, which is an approach orientation to all phenomena. We say it poetically, in instructions. I said something about all phenomena are is the Buddha whispering in our ear or something. Yeah, that's a weird way of putting it, but it's like that's an approach orientation. Yeah, and the deepest kind of approach is love. It's love and samadhi. That's the deepest contact we can make with phenomena. And in this way, the potential kind of extinction learning is most profound when we approach that deeply. Yeah, I'll say more about that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Diane, please.
Hi. So that figure about 3/4 of them starting it because of health issues is probably the way John Kabat-Zinn started it. But that sort of explains to me why I don't, how much I need Sangha and how judgmental I get against all of us who are suffering versus those who manage to get by. And I just came off a 2-month retreat, my first, and it was great. And it was not the miracle I wanted. And this is darn hard, and I'm running out of time. And I just feel like I'm envious of those people who manage to get by better. Because why not, make hay while the sun is shining? I don't know where my question is, but I'm sure I said enough for you to react to.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. Yeah. Well, some of the language around Dharma is like it's measureless, meaning we're actually invited to step out of the realm of the comparing mind. Yeah. So I get where you're coming from. I know. You're going to be like, oh, I know, Matthew, whatever. But it's like, no, we're invited to, like, this is not the view from which to understand suffering. It is suffering itself. Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, okay, how do you actually greater than, less than, equal to? It's like, no, we're really being invited out of that realm, because that is symptomatic of the dukkha itself. Yeah. And so it's one of the most, it's one of the most painful mind states. It's just gruesome. There was an essayist who said something like, of the 7 deadly sins, only envy is no fun at all. Right? Like, that's the only one, like the lust and the, whatever, gluttony, like, yeah, envy is the only one with no fun at all. And it is no fun at all. And so it's like, okay, this is another expression of sakyaditi, and like this is the kind of this is needs to be, as my teacher said, love to death, and so just be careful how you kind of the defective dharma self congeals.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Ram, please.
There.
Okay, got you now. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, welcome.
Beautiful. So reason I signed up to this course is, first of all, honestly, Matthew Brensilver, I saw the name, I registered, then I read the topic, So I love the way every one of your courses have impacted me. I've been practicing 8 years. I'm really very disciplined. I do 2.5 hours meditation every day, and I've done 10 weeks of retreats last year, unfortunately or fortunately, all on Zoom. The question that I come from a STEM background, but I have this deep desire to know topic like what you're talking, right? I mean, science of mindfulness. I don't have any academic credentials behind this. I'm wondering, why am I interested in this topic? First of all, number two, is it going
Wait, why are you interested in what topic exactly?
In the science and psychology of mindfulness?
Yeah.
Right. I'm enjoying the practice very much. I'm devoted to it. I'm also a chaplain. I serve in a prison and all the good stuff, life. But I'm starting to think, I have read enough books on science of mindfulness, of the Dalai Lama's compilation of science and the work he organized. I'm starting to wonder, is it not helping my practice much with this much approach to knowledge? Should I just break away from this and just enjoy and experience the practice?
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think it's totally legitimate to put all of this down and just practice, sincerely. It really is. I do not feel like it's necessary, for many people. I feel like for a long time, the meditation research was so kind of primitive and sort of reductionistic. It was kind of just like demonstration projects, just saying like, this is not a cult. Really, there's something here. That was the sort of spirit of a lot of it, just dignifying it as a topic for empirically responsive people or something like that. And it did not add much to practice. But now I think we're starting to get into, just recently, starting to get to the point where people who clearly have fallen in love with Dharma and have a long history and are collaborating in interdisciplinary teams, or they are the scientists themselves, and it's been seeded in a lot of different ways. And it's starting to get to the point where it's changing some of how I think about practice. And some of the science is actually feeding back into how I think about Dharma practice. And so that's starting to happen. But I think I wouldn't feel like obligated to look to the emerging science around mindfulness to like support your path of practice. And
beautiful. Say this has got 2,500-year history. I get that, right? Is it going to help me overcome hindrances in some unique way? I'm also basically putting this all under craving. I have yet another craving, wanting to know this topic, but I can't explain it. Thank you so much for your response.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes we sort of like get a little academic and sort of like soak that up, but then we need to like dry the ground out with more practice. But you're doing a lot of practice, and so that's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Two more, and then we'll. I see. Yeah. Let's see. Where are we at? Okay. Let's take the last three questions here, and then we'll take a break. Yeah, please.
Hi,
Yeah.
thank you for doing this. I think you're amazing. And I just wanted to say I enjoy the same thing that I think it was Ram said. Just it's interesting. It's fascinating. Like, what's more interesting than this? I guess I feel I do the same thing he does and kind of have the same background and just feel like this is just so interesting. Anyway, I have two questions that are sort of outward pointing. One of them is about 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a several day retreat type thing where they played every day a section of talks by Pema Chodron on this topic. And I've never been able to find it again. It was recorded. And I was wondering if you know what it is. It was really interesting. She went through and said, this is what we know about the brain, and this is what we know about the Dharma. And she was talking about the paramitras. Do you happen to know?
I don't. No, I don't.
It was really interesting, and it was really good and real meaty stuff. And I haven't been able, I've gone through all kinds of, I've tried to find it and I can't find it. So it's out there.
Okay.
And
okay.
The other one is also similar. I'm wondering, do you know Sam Harris's work? Does he?
Oh, crazy.
Some of it. Yeah.
So I just was wondering if you could talk at all about his approach to neuroscience and Dharma and how that aligns with yours, because it seems very similar. I'd love to hear him interview you, because I think that would be great, but I didn't know how close you were to his work.
Yeah, I definitely don't know it enough to speak to it. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. I know he's in kind of like sort of Dzogchen, is sort of blending a little bit of the Vipassana approach with some of the Dzogchen approach and the kind of, and talks in sort of non-dualish sort of ways a lot of times, but kind of in a sort of without smuggling in as much metaphysics, and yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I really don't know about like the approach well enough, but it's that I see that, his app that is like a common one for in coming in from retreats. I'm seeing that more and more. Yeah. So sorry, I can't speak more to it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to know. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you so much for, offering this point of view. It's been expansive for me to listen. I guess I'm one of those people at the moment enrolled in a science-based mindfulness training program. But I feel a sense of betrayal towards, because, I'm a lover of the Dhamma. And so now I have the dukkha of the love, which is, a sense of betrayal towards the Dhamma, to eliminate it completely from the conversation. And I'm kind of trying to find a way in where I can hold both and, not see it as an either or. I was just wondering if you had could shine some light on a path that might, help me receive what I signed up with a noble motivation and not reject it.
Well, I think it a lot of it is how it's done. Like, is it done with, with integrity and with heart and with a kind of reverence for the sacred? Is it done with, is it done with a kind of a sense of not like highly selectively extracting practices in these reductionistic ways versus, which can feel really yucky, and versus like being skillful means. And I think that depends a lot on the wholesomeness of the intentions of the people designing the intervention. And for me, the line, I teach in mostly Buddhist settings, but some in very secular settings, primarily UCLA. And for me, the dividing line is not Buddhist versus secular. The dividing line is kind of like, reverence for the sacred versus the kind of commodification of attentional practice, and that to me is what matters. And so I think there are ways of sharing the practice in secular contexts that are really have heart and have that sense of reverence with it. But it can get tricky, especially when it gets pressurized by kind of symptom orientation, where it's like the practice has to deliver on these outcomes, and it's this very short-term window, and you're really taking that 0.5 milligram of Prozac, and then the practice itself becomes cramped because we're sort of like, it just like there's the delight of investigation, is sort of not there, and the sort of the pressure of becoming, of like bhava tanha, is so strong, and it's like I don't know. So it's tricky, but I think it can be done, but it depends, and I might share your sense of like, Tanisro Bhikkhu was asked about this, and I don't remember all of his response, but I do remember one component which was kind of stayed with me. He was hesitant in his own ways, as he would be, but it was something like, any way that Buddhism makes its way into culture is a good thing. And I that was meaningful to me, even in its like reductionistic or, like forms or something. Like it was like, any ways that the, wisdom, compassion makes its way in, this is a good thing. And I sort of keep that in my heart, and that stayed with me. And so, how does all this sound, or where does this leave you?
Yeah, I'm also recognizing there's a hindrance here within myself as well. So I appreciate you sharing, even your dialogue with it and your inquiry with it. What comes up is, there's this presentation that if mindfulness is presented with the name of Dhamma or Buddha, it is not going to be received. And that's the idea that a part of me wants to challenge. Because in my own experience, it is not true, because I spent years not attaching the Buddha or the Dhamma to my practice, and I was spinning. And the minute I kind of made that association and kind of dove into that world, it started to unfold in a meaningful way. So to assume that we remove it, it's that's my question. Right? And I don't have an answer, and so I'm trying to just explore and expand my perspective. And I really appreciate this conversation.
Well, thanks for your warm-heartedness around it. And I can say, like, just within the university context, because there are religion, theology departments, all this stuff, it's actually way less cramped there. When I'm at UCLA Medical School, it's like, it's very easy for me just to start by kind of like articulating the roots of mindfulness, and using Pali words and all of this. It's like, it's not weird there at all. It's more in some of the kind of educational settings where it feels more cramped, kind of. And so, yeah, I hope we can, it feels, it's like John Kabat-Zinn would be mortified that people think he invented mindfulness or something. Like, that was never his intention. And he kind of came out in that article I read from in 2011, in a very striking way. And that felt important to me. And on our side, on the Buddhist side, like, we there can just be like a little creeping territoriality about it, so it's like no one owns the Dhamma, it's like we all belong to it equally or something like that. And so anyway, I just say that too, just for us to watch in our own minds. And yeah, but may it be done well, and maybe the last thing I'll say is just that what the Buddhists tend to accuse the secular folks of leaving out is sila, ethics. That has not generally been my experience. The sila is really actually well represented. The ethical roots of it is well represented in a lot of the secular mindfulness stuff. What is left out in the secular articulations is the renunciation, the surrender. That is what is minimized, actually. And renunciation is at the heart of this path. Mindfulness is not something for nothing, right? And so it's tricky, right? Because it's like you enter a Dharma hall and the teacher basically asks you for your life. Yeah, that is not a reasonable starting point in a lot of therapy, a mindfulness class, a school, so this kind of thing. And so the renunciation is sort of like, it's like titrated, and it's like they start like with a really, really small ask, just take a look at your mind, whereas we kind of begin with like, take refuge, down on your knees, like this is, the depth, the breadth of practice, that kind of reverence, right? And anyway, more to be said. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, last one, please, Sue. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add another perspective, which kind of reinforces what you were just saying. I was in one of the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction classes in a medical setting at the same time that I was really starting to explore the Dharma. And for me, it was very synergistic because I was able to see the limitations of the class, but also how it related to some of the other things I was doing. I think that the woman who taught it, she was a practitioner, but she was really walking a tightrope between the secular piece and the spiritual piece, because most of the people in the class were there because of physical problems. The most common was chronic pain. In fact, I think John Kabat-Zinn started the whole thing as when he was associated with a pain clinic at the University of Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to be able to reach everybody on whatever level they could relate. And some of the people, obviously were not Buddhist. Some of them were not religious at all. Some of them were practitioners of other religions that wouldn't be able to relate to it if she spoke in Dharma terms. And so she really didn't, but I don't think she was diluting what she was presenting. She was just doing it in a way that she thought she could reach the most people and that they would be able to take what they could from it. So that was my perspective to the class. It had limited application to me, but I was able to use what I could from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Got it. Great. Thanks for the testimonial there. And yeah, you know, in a way, I feel like very deeply, obviously connected to the Buddhist tradition, and at the same time, I do think sometimes, like, look, if I can't articulate this in a different language, if I need to legitimate this practice by referencing the suttas, is that maybe a problem, you know? And I want to be able to, I think we can actually talk about these practices in a range of different ways that are not self-referential, you know, it's not citing the authority of the text itself, you know. And so I think there are ways to really talk about the depths of practice that are amenable to even you know, very scientifically minded folks. But I do get the tightrope, and I get and I don't think it's legitimate to say, you know, like, well, Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy, or it's just self-evident, you know, like at some level, all religions think they're not religions, you know, it's like, you know, it's not like, you know, we study the word of God. That's not a religion, right? That's just like the truth. Yeah. And like, same thing with the Dharma. And so, anyway, I don't want to wander into philosophical territory of which I'm not qualified to speak, but so I will take a break precisely now. And yeah, but I appreciate the spirit of the conversation. And so let's take a little time away from the screen.